Welcome to the Art, Design, and Architecture Museum, and the first of 3 lectures accompanying the exhibition God's Glory and Spirituality, Historical Fictions of the Sigmund Morgenroth Collection of Renaissance Medals and Plaquettes. My name is Sophia McCabe, and I'm the academic coordinator for the museum and curator of the exhibition. The ADNA Museum began in 1959. 5 years later, after its 1963 exhibition here, the Morgenroth collection was acquired by the museum with the support of UC Regents and UCSB affiliates. It remains one of the most comprehensive collections of 15th to 18th century medals and plaquettes in the world. God's Glory and Spirituality presents 26 of the over 430 works, making this exhibition the largest showing of the group in over 10 years. A collaboration with the history department, the exhibition includes historical fictions written by students accompanying each medal. You can download the booklet of fictions as well as listen to the audio recordings of them via the QR codes in the gallery or from our website. What drew me to this collection was the immediacy of such small works of art. They fit into the palm of one's hands. We see incredible sculptural details of glory by celebrated artists such as Pisanello, who is credited as the originator of the Renaissance medal with his 15th century portrait of Byzantine Emperor John VIII Palaiologos, which you can see in the exhibition. I am most grateful to our speaker's generosity in sharing his family history and new findings from the family archive that will bring greater knowledge to the collection. And now, it is my utmost pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Peter Lackner, the grandson of Sigmund Morgenroth.
This is Sigmund, my grandfather. I should say our grandfather. My brother Tom is here as well. And good afternoon. Thank you so much all for coming. And many thanks to all who created this exhibition. I was thrilled to find out that part of my grandfather's collection would again be presented to the local public, and for such a long run at that. I'm not an expert on Renaissance antiques, not even the works of Sigmund's collection, but the news about the show made me want to share some personal memories about my grandfather and aspects of his complex personality and life. And to do so, I finally had to delve into boxes of family documents in our garage, which have been there for over 20 years, some from Sigmund, some from my parents, and from my uncles. So many thanks for the nudge that I finally got to that. Here's some of the content of what I had to deal with. Mostly legal documents in this kind of script that's hard to read and in German, and letters going back to 1870. And look at that handwriting. We can't do that today, can we? But now I want to share with you some of the factual and visual gems I found in this treasure trove. But first, you may be wondering why our family branch is Lackner and not Morgenroth. Lots of Lackners here this evening. The short version, in Europe during the Third Reich, my father, born Ernst Morgenroth, was writing articles critical of Hitler and fascism. His father, Sigmund, demanded he choose a pseudonym to avoid endangering other Morgenroths. My father chose Stefan Lackner and later made it his official name when getting US citizenship. My parents, Stephen and Puck Lackner, and their 3 sons, Thomas, Lucas, and myself, lived next door to Sigmund and his wife Lucy in Upper Montecito for about 12 years, from 1951 to Sigmund's death in 1963. That's the house we lived in. After there was a little addition of a living room and studio because it was too small for us. My parents saw Sigmund and Lucy as neighbors almost daily for business and caregiving reasons. But 2 or 3 times a week, Opapa and Omama came over for tea via a pathway through the hedge, or our family would visit them. We 3 boys were growing up as California kids, playing Robin Hood and digging underground forts, just boys being boys, and we were often smudged and sweaty. But the grandparents lived an insular life in both time and space next door. That's their house, with Montecito Peak in the background. They still wore clothing brought along from Europe decades earlier, maintained their Prussian values and tidiness and decorum, and spoke almost only German. They even had a German live-in housekeeper cook. The only phrase I recall Omama trying in English was, "Will you cake?" which she gradually expanded to, "Will you chocolate?" Sometimes they approached our home unannounced. Then Sigmund would bellow a warning at the far edge of the lawn, "Guten Tag." And as they slowly approached our house, Puck made us quickly change clothing, wash our faces, comb our hair, all with reminders to be polite. And the same ritual preceded our visiting their home next door. Over there we usually sat outside because their house was too full of antique furniture and art to safely accommodate 3 fidgety boys. However, I recall at least one occasion when I was sent to my grandparents alone to deliver a document. Sigmund invited me into the living room, which was usually taboo for us kids. He sat down near a chest with many flat drawers and beckoned me to a footstool close by. He pondered, pulled out a drawer which revealed rows of metal objects laid out in velvet. He told me to choose one, and when I pointed at a larger piece, he smiled and asked me to help him lift it out of its nest, and then he gently left it in my hand. It was much heavier than I anticipated, and when I seemed nervous about dropping it, he said in German, "Don't worry, it's hard metal that has survived centuries of travels and wars and will survive us as well. Close your eyes and feel the face as if you were blind. Now turn it over and look at the backside." With quiet enthusiasm, he translated some phrases and explained when where it had been made and for what special occasion. I wasn't understanding much, but Sigmund's secretive excitement was contagious, and I felt we were 2 pirates relishing some stolen treasure. And I was relieved that this often stern and imposing elder was in such a playful mood. We only studied 2 or 3 pieces, then he wiped them off with his crisp handkerchief, returned them to the nest, and carefully closed the door. But how did Sigmund and Lucy end up in Santa Barbara? And how did his collection end up in this museum? The Odyssey of Sigmund's life has many twists and turns because he and Lucy moved to different cities 8 times, sometimes having to start anew, rebuilding their financial foundation and lives. For centuries, many generations of Morgenroths resided in central Germany in and around Bamberg, which is this city. They were mainly hops merchants for that renowned German beer, and some were medical doctors and lawyers. My father wrote in his autobiography later, "We were prosperous Jews, fortunate and liberal and involved in community matters." Here is the grandfather, Sigmund's grandparents, Lazarus Morgenroth. Here, Sigmund's parents, Heinrich, and Sigmund was born in Bamberg in 1874, one of 3 boys. In all those documents, I found nothing about Sigmund's youth. Probably that was destroyed in World War I. But in 1906, when Sigmund was 33, a nurse named Lucy Gast was brought into his parents' home to take care of the bedridden father with a heart condition. Sister Lucy was a devout Protestant with strict ethical principles. My father wrote, there was a giant contrast between the lively cosmopolitan Morgenroth family and the dutiful nurse who had the misfortune of falling in love with the son of her patient. She was a regal, quiet beauty. Sigmund compared her to Giorgione's Venus, calling her my Giorgionella. While Sigmund's father was still alive, there was no talk about him marrying the Christian sister Lucy, but shortly after the patient's death in 1907, the wedding took place as a civil ceremony. A mixed marriage was quite unusual at the time, and in provincial Bamberg, their engagement and wedding stirred up so much spiteful neighborhood chatter among Protestants and Jews alike that the newlyweds moved to Paris. That's their move number 1. Please keep count. This is the first picture in Paris, I believe. Blessed with fluent French and an adventurous spirit and an entrepreneurial cleverness, Sigmund founded a telephone company which also produced the first office intercoms. He gained respect as a businessman. The Morgenroth prospered. Their sons were born in Paris, Henry and Ernest in 1909 and 10. Look at the hats they wore then. And Charles in 1912. They enjoyed seaside vacations. And I love this next picture because it captures Sigmund's true nature. The tie and then rolled up pants. That's Sigmund. In 1914, the outbreak of World War I abruptly ended the good life. Suddenly France, where they were living, was hostile territory for Germans. As a patriotic German Jew, Sigmund felt his services were needed in the fatherland, and so they hastily moved to Berlin, move number 2. Almost everything left behind in Paris, assets, house, furniture, artworks, was confiscated by the French as enemy spoils. Landing in Berlin with 3 little children and relatively penniless, Sigmund had to begin anew. He produced grenade fuses and other weapon components for the German military. As the war dragged on for 5 years, the family's quality of life descended into poverty and hunger. My father later wrote, "We growing boys wore the same shoes until our toes became painfully bent." When the war ended in 1919, Sigmund seized a business opportunity in Bad Homburg. The family moved it once again. Number 3, a little step up in quality of housing. There he founded a factory for electric clocks, which were new at the time, and prosperity steadily returned. This is Sigmund and Lucy in 1924, and here is Sigmund's desk. And seaside vacations were again possible. The kids had grown. In 1925, the growth of Sigmund's business led them to move to the larger city, Frankfurt am Main, move number 4. They lived here for 8 years, even more prosperous. They took mountain vacations in their very own car and did hikes to mountain peaks and took rests on the meadows of the mountains. And it was during this longer, stable period that Sigmund began collecting medals and plaquettes. This is a purchase list I found that shows the first piece was bought in May 19, 1926. Jumping to the last page, this purchase list shows the first piece bought then. The list only goes to 1931, but reveals his collection contained around 140 pieces by then, with much more to follow. In 1933, the Third Reich was officially declared. Having learned from the 1914 experience of hastily fleeing Paris and losing so much, Sigmund prepared efficiently and thoroughly for the family's second emigration, ironically back to Paris. Move number 5. Stephen described a typically clever strategy of his father. The Nazis put stringent limits on financial assets that immigrants could take out of Germany, but early on there were no restrictions on personal belongings, furniture, and works of art. So Sigmund immediately purchased several coin collections from old aristocratic families, as well as more medals and plaquettes. There's a sweet irony in that the Nazis limiting currency exports resulted in Sigmund's collections being enriched all the more. And as for Sigmund buying antique coins, this list shows, it's 33 pages long, this list shows 1,066 collectible coins paid for with non-exportable Reichsmarks, and all those coins landed in Paris, the first half of a very original money laundering scheme. Here another example of Sigmund's bureaucratic thoroughness. The Frankfurt police, help, this isn't working right. I'll have to skip that one. The Frankfurt police official document of their change of residence to Paris. Most Jews fleeing Germany later on certainly did not or could not register their change of residence with the police. They just fled and didn't want Germans to know where they were moving to. With the wealth of belongings Sigmund and Lucy brought to Paris, they set up a comfortable home in a small villa near Versailles. Sigmund reconnected with business associates from his first Paris residency 2 decades earlier and rapidly regained his financial footing. In early 1934, my father Stefan discovered the paintings of Max Beckmann, which had just been banned by the Nazis as degenerate art. Stephen later wrote, "I immediately knew this art would determine the direction of my life." He wanted to purchase one large painting, but as a 23-year-old student had no funds, so he asked his father for assistance. Although Sigmund was by no means convinced of the value of Beckmann's paintings, he trusted his son's enthusiasm and financed Stephen's first purchase. And in the following 6 years, he backed the commissioning of no fewer than 21 oil paintings and a set of lithographs for a book Stephen published called The Mensch ist kein Haustier, with illustrations by Beckmann.
Okay.
One of the commissioned paintings was a portrait of Stephen, here with Stephen many years later. That's Stephen as a student in Paris. Sometime later, Stephen and Sigmund even committed to monthly stipends for Max Beckmann, also in exchange for paintings, but this gave Beckmann the financial and emotional stability to continue his creative life. even during his exile in Amsterdam. Of course, Sigmund the businessman assumed Stephen would soon sell many of these works for a profit, but Stephen's various ambitious efforts seemed cursed for almost 2 decades. With his 1766 antique coins now in Paris, Sigmund wanted to complete his money laundering and transmute the coins back to cash. His business instinct proclaimed, why not found a coin dealership complete with board of directors and stockholders? He convinced coin experts in Basel, Switzerland, to participate, and with many lawyers and legal documents involved, in 1933, the Münzhandlung Basel became an official company. Being in Switzerland, it was not endangered by Nazi confiscation, and Sigmund wisely included his 3 sons as shareholders. Over time, he sold most of the coins through this venue. Although the Nazis didn't invade France until 1940, Sigmund recognized years earlier that Jews in France would be in increasing danger. Anti-Semitism within France was becoming more threatening, and Nazi spies and provocateurs were infiltrating French society. So with his customary courage in anticipating foreseeable dangers, he convinced his younger son, Charles, to move to New York to pursue his ambition of dealing in antiquities, but also to serve as a scout for his parents. Then on September 17, 1938, Sigmund wrote this letter. No, there's something not working with this slide, so I'm sorry. This letter, a letter to his sons, which basically informed Henry and Stephen about the growing danger, and that he and Lucy were taking a steamship to the USA within months. Hello, Chancellor Yang. Thank you for coming. He most urgently recommended that the sons also leave France, either by moving to Switzerland or joining Sigmund and Lucy on board. Stephen and Henry joined their parents' exodus, booking passage on the same ship to New York for April 19, 1939. Half a day before departure, the family heard on the radio that the ship had been destroyed by a fire in the harbor of Le Havre. All their belongings, including antiquities, furniture, and the collection were on that ship, as well as Stephen's 21 Beckmann paintings. Imagine the despair felt by the family at this point. But soon they were informed that all their possessions had not yet been loaded on board and were safely stored on the pier. Fortuitous incompetence. A few days later, they boarded another ship with their stuff, the Champlain, and made it to New York. This is my grandfather's passport with a big J, and added phrases about, they added his name, they added Israel, which they added to all Jewish passports. Imagine having to show that going through Ellis Island. Thanks to Charles' diligent preparations, who went earlier, the family went directly to reserved hotel rooms in Central Park West. And the crates with Stephen's 21 paintings were transported directly from the ship to the prominent New York art dealer, Kurt Valentin. Charles soon introduced his brothers to other German-speaking refugees involved in art and literature. At a soiree, Stephen met the Austrian Elisabeth Pernkopf, nicknamed Puck, who would very soon become his wife. Sigmund, from his hotel room desk, established transatlantic postal relationships with friends and business partners in Europe. One such correspondence involved the cultural philosopher Walter Benjamin. Stephen had befriended him in 1936 in Paris. Here an early letter from Benjamin from that year. In 1937, Benjamin had written Stephen about extreme financial hardships preventing him from working. Stephen and Sigmund sent him some funding. Father and son had repeatedly urged Benjamin to flee to New York with their financial assistance, but he had remained indecisive. Now in New York in June 1939, both Stephen and Sigmund received musy letters from Benjamin in Paris. After an update about his struggles came the apologetic request for more survival funds. Sigmund wired funds to Paris. After Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Benjamin wrote again, finally requesting funding for fleeing to the US. Sigmund emphatically confirmed his willingness to assist, but Benjamin panicked and fled over the Pyrenees to Spain and then committed suicide. Sigmund and Stefan were very saddened that their many efforts and offers had been in vain. The Morgenroth's first New York autumn grew bitter cold. They decided to spend the winter in Florida, and it turned out to be a real move, so we're at move number 7. The sons rented them a Victorian-style house with spacious garden in the Gulf of Mexico. Good that they're not there now. There, Stephen and Puck got engaged. I couldn't resist putting in this photo. Sigmund swam in the warm ocean almost daily. One day, Puck saw Sigmund floating lifelessly far from shore. She swam out, pulled him out onto the beach, and pumped his chest free of water. A doctor determined a heart attack. When Sigmund got up and slowly ascended the house steps, Stefan asked the doctor if that was wise. The doctor shrugged and said, "It makes no difference. He won't survive the night anyway." That was in March 1940. Although Sigmund's heart never fully recovered, with his pulse never higher than 32 to 40 beats per minute, he lived another 23 years until 1963. Pacemakers hadn't yet been invented. In mid-1940, the Nazis invaded Belgium and France. Beckmann, still hiding in Amsterdam, continued exchanging letters with Stephen, and Sigmund wired monthly payments to Holland, although doubting that Stephen would ever receive the commissioned paintings. The last money transfer on May 8th still reached Beckmann, 2 days before the German invasion of Holland. And then the connection was cut off. For 5 years, the Morgenroths didn't even know if the artist was still alive. After a year in USA, Sigmund sent Stefan and Puck, now newlyweds, on a mission to find a place where the Morgenroths could enjoy settling down. They explored and rejected options in Texas, Colorado, Idaho, Los Angeles, then discovered Santa Barbara and lived there for half a year before successfully convincing Sigmund and Lucy to move there as well. Move number 8. After the 4-day train ride from New York to Santa Barbara, Sigmund left the train on a stretcher, lifted through the wagon window. He seemed weak and confused, and his family thought he wouldn't live long. But the Santa Barbara climate and peaceful environment were to grant him and Lucy more than 2 decades of relatively good health. They were never to travel again. They rented a modest house in the then sleepy suburb of Montecito, with Puck and Stephen living in Santa Barbara proper and Henry in Los Angeles. Sigmund and Lucy received visits almost daily. In 1942, Sigmund arranged the first U.S. exhibition of his medal and plaquette collection at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. running from January to March 1943. That was new to me. A second showing followed at the Art Institute of Chicago in April and May 1944. The catalog produced for the Chicago exhibition became a useful reference work for the collection. Sigmund's handwritten note on this copy says, "Exhibitions, Mills College and the Young Museum." Inside paid are the markings which show which works were lent to each institution, but I couldn't find out any more details about these two shows. November 1943, as the Third Reich became a global threat, Stephen was drafted and sent off to Europe as a US soldier, leaving Puck and Henry to take care of Sigmund and Lucy in Montecito. Understandably, they all worried a great deal about Stefan, who served as an interpreter and reconnaissance expert in France and Germany. But when World War II ended in May 45, he returned to Santa Barbara alive, to everyone's great relief. The Morgenroths wrote friends and relatives to see who had survived the war and the Third Reich. Many letters remained unanswered. Beckmann, who had hidden in Amsterdam throughout the Nazi occupation, did respond with the news that he now intended to emigrate to New York after the Third Reich. Soon thereafter he succeeded, of course with Sigmund's and Stefan's support. Stephen had promised Puck that they could have a child after Hitler was defeated, and the promise was promptly fulfilled. In June 46, Peter was born. Here being held by my Omaha in the back on her lap in 1946. During the new era of peace, the Morgenroths had several family gatherings. Henry, with second wife Ruth and daughter Michelle, came from Los Angeles. Charles and his wife Marion lived in New York but took the train to California. About these reunions, Stephen wrote, "My father gave patriarchal speeches and magnanimously solved all problems in the world." In 1947, my parents moved back to Europe with me still a baby, but after 3 years, letters from Sigmund and Lucy revealed their increasing loneliness and declining health. So in late 1950, Puck and Stephen returned to Santa Barbara to take care of them, bringing along their newborn son, Tom, and of course me. Sigmund and Lucy had purchased a 2-parcel property in Montecito with 2 older houses. They lived in the larger house and wanted us Lackners to move in next door, which we did. I already shared something about this period of being neighbors. It was the largest block of time we all had together. My father described this era as follows. My parents needed reliable caregiving. Papa still had heart blockages. When his pulse was very low or he was feeling ill, Puck had to run over and give him an injection, sometimes even at night. Continuing Stephen's quote, the parents were happy when we took them to the beach or on short walks. We wanted to respond to their every wish, which was sometimes hard with us having 3 small children. Papa had hired Puck as his secretary. She took dictation and typed his extensive correspondence. Occasionally, my mother came home from working with Sigmund, taking dictation, exhausted and close to tears, usually after I had heard, even through the hedges, Sigmund's voice crushing and scolding. When I tried to comfort her, she would comfort me instead, explaining that Opapa hadn't been angry with her, but rather with the recipient of the letter being dictated. So his shouting at Puck was a variation of kill the messenger, due to his frustration about being so distant from his businesses and a letter taking weeks to arrive in Europe. But my poor mother also accepted Sigmund's wrath, because our family really needed the money. To be fair, Sigmund usually was very sweet with Puck, thankful for how much she was assisting him, and after all, Puck had once saved his life. A few weeks ago, I asked my brothers Lucas and Tom to share a few memories about life with the grandparents. They were 7 and 4 years younger than me, respectively, and both understood very little German, so their perspective is interesting. First from Lucas, who isn't here today, an abridged excerpt. I recall the musky smell and Victorian formality of their dim house filled with paintings and antiques, the mocha pastries dipped in coffee, the girdling stone fish pond, the wiring strung tree to tree connected to the alarm bell at our home to alert us to any emergency at Sigmund's home, the juniper sentinels along the walkway, the family photo sessions on the lawn. And here, with our backs turned to the house and mountains, and with Omama and Opapa surrounded by their progeny. This is one such family gathering from 1953. That's Lucas on Omama's lap this time. And the next family reunion was about 4 years later in 1957. And now, Brother Tom's statement, also abridged. In my young mind, Sigmund and Lucas embodied a Europe that was equal parts romantic beauty and frightening menace. I have to say they did little to dissuade me of these extremes, not through any concerted effort, but more by the formality of our relationship. Although our family owes its existence to my grandfather's shrewd perception and his resources, Sigmund and Lucy remained stubbornly European in a place, California, that at that time embodied positive change and optimism. Our compound was a perfect microcosm of the duality of our worlds. Growing up in my parents' house, I was enthralled with the contemporary art on all our walls and the forward-leaning music from Stravinsky to Woody Guthrie. I was in love with all of it despite my shyness. My grandparents dwelled in the house adjacent to ours. They lived about 100 feet and a continent away. Tom continues, I inherited a portrait of my grandparents painted by local artist Don Freeman. I look at it with bemusement because Mr. Freeman had the astute eye of a caricaturist combined with a very gentle view of human nature. I love it for what my grandparents could have been. End quote. In the 1950s and 60s, Stephen arranged various Beckmann exhibitions both in the US and abroad. Finally, Sigmund's enormous overall investment in Stephen's collection began to bear financial fruit. At first, the sales had a tragically small profit margin. My father later wrote, we were anything but wealthy. Today one can't believe how little my Beckmanns were worth and how difficult it was to sell them. But it had to be, even though my heart bled with each sale, when I had to sacrifice my favorite for an amount hardly higher than the original purchase price. But Sigmund did live to see the prices rise exponentially and was relieved the sales at least were giving his starving writer's son financial stability. Of course, had he lived several more decades to see how high the prices ultimately were heading, he would have had another heart attack in amazement. In 1961, the end game began. Here an entry from Stephen's diary. He did a diary and an autobiography. August 26th, yesterday, my mother died. Sigmund and I were in the hospital with her. That afternoon she begged, "Don't leave me." And then the battle with death began. The battle for death, not against death. And in his autobiography, Stephen wrote, "As a widower, my father deserved great pity. Outwardly, he bore the loss with composure. He was truly happy when studying his art treasures. He sat in his easy chair holding one of the bronze portraits and stroking it lovingly. Often he studied the pertinent historical literature and made notes. Seeing him immersed in such intellectual fascination with an almost physical abandonment is how I best remember him." End of quote. After Lucy's passing, Sigmund's will to live remained strong. Whenever a black-rimmed letter arrived announcing the death of yet another friend or business associate, Sigmund would proudly proclaim, "Ha! Now I've outlived that one as well." After the death of his dear but quite prudish wife, Sigmund became somewhat freer about telling old Prussian dirty jokes and rhymes. And once he pulled out a silver medal out of his vest pocket and let me study it. This medal commemorates the peace treaty of Utrecht of 1713. On the face, it depicts representatives of France, Britain, and Holland still arguing and physically fighting. On the back side, successful peace negotiations are taking place. With friendly words such as, "I am pleased that you are pleased." That's one of the inscriptions in the crown. Sigmund gave me the medal for my 16th birthday. I guess he didn't find it appropriate for his formal collection. And I apologize if my sharing it now also seems inappropriate. But I still cherish the gift because this image often comes to mind when I see headlines about today's politicians negotiating national or international agreements. During his final years, Sigmund dealt with diminished income from Europe and rising expenses in Montecito. Many letters between Sigmund and his sons in 1962 involved liquidating antiques, paintings, furniture, and even the collection. Charles, as an art dealer and curator at the Metropolitan Museum, helped his father find buyers and secure sales. But when it came to the medals and plaquettes, profit was not the crucial factor. Early on, Sigmund and his three sons agreed the collection should not be dissolved for maximum total profit. Henry and Charles negotiated with several candidates interested in the full collection, including the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Crest Foundation, and the newly founded Lackner. However, Stephen, Puck, and Henry were personal friends with faculty of this department, including David Gebhard, Alfred Moyer, Howard Warshaw, and William Dole. So a discussion about a purchase for this museum developed quite organically. Of the three museums in the running, the difference in the offers was secondary. Various factors were weighed, such as the larger museums having a higher public profile and they being more specialized in antiquities. But the decisive factor was the deep understanding of and respect for the collection that the faculty here revealed. so that Sigmund and all three sons chose UCSB as their clear preference. Before a purchase became concrete, a major exhibition of Sigmund's collection took place in these rooms with 102 objects on display. That's the Santa Barbara News Press announcing the opening. The opening reception was Tuesday, April 16, 1963. 4 days later, on April 20th, Sigmund Morgenroth passed away. I'd like to think that Sigmund died in contentment, knowing that over 100 pieces of his dear collection were being shared with the public in his beloved second hometown, and knowing that his collection would most likely be acquired by this museum. And so it came to pass. On May 22nd, 63, the department signed a 6-month option because the UC Regents and UCSB affiliates first had to approve the purchase and secure funds. And almost 6 months later, on November 3rd, the news press reported the collection being, quote, acquired by the art gallery at UCSB. This wasn't called a museum yet. Here Chancellor Cheadle with Puck and Stephen. And here a commemorative gift from the department to my parents, slightly damaged in storage. It shows Alfred Mueller, chairman of the art department, Stephen Lackner, and David Gebhardt, director of the art gallery. Stephen represented the Morgenroth family since Sigmund could no longer attend in person. He was reunited with his Georgianelle, Lucy, in the Montecito Cemetery. I'm certain Sigmund was greatly enamored of and inspired by the spirit of the Renaissance, when families like the Medicis sponsored artistic freedom and productivity as a central component of life and civilization. Sigmund's generosity of spirit reflected that worldview in many ways. He was a true businessman, but ultimately he did business for the sake of the arts. For many reasons, Sigmund's collection is much greater than the sum of its parts. One primary reason is that in its entirety it embodies a tremendous dedication and devotion to the world of art, especially considering the foreboding obstacles Sigmund surmounted in building the collection and keeping it whole while saving it from the realm of fascist Europe, and then making sure it found a safe home in this bastion of liberal arts. To end with another quote from my father's autobiography. A few months later, the entire collection went to the University of California in Santa Barbara, where it can be the subject of seminars and dissertations. Here the name Sigmund Morgenroth is finally being kept alive. And I and the Lackner Morgenroth clan thank you for that. Thank you very much.